Hello, and welcome to the Brand Hunch podcast, where we explore ideas and hunches around how marketers are growing great brands. It's a look under the hood at how much is marketing science and how much is built on a hunch. Today, I'm joined by Amanda Gordon. Amanda's been strategy director at For the People branding agency for a bunch of years. She then moved over to Future Super, a super fund focused on ethical investments, including clean energy, as their head of creative and later CMO, then into a gig as CMO at the Sustainable Investment Exchange, which is Australia's first share trading platform combining activism and investing. She's now back in strategy land at For the People in Seattle. She also writes a brand-led growth newsletter for bold brands. She's a strategy whiz. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm so excited to be here.
So from the start, give me a little bit of an overview of your background and how you ended up coming full circle back to For the People.
Sure. So my story is, in a nutshell, I'm a marketer with a deep background in brand strategy and brand-led growth. And every chapter of my career has taught me something new, not just about branding, but about how to make it actually work inside a business. So like a lot of people, I started after college just trying to get my foot in the door. I wanted to be a copywriter. I was obsessed with storytelling. And I don't know if you remember Groupon, but
I do.
I pitched myself to one of their competitors in Australia. And in classic startup fashion, they hired me to be a salesperson with all of my copywriting skills. I started as a salesperson, and a few months later, they were hiring for a copywriter. So I walked into the GM's office and I said, well, I'm a copywriter. Why don't you just hire me? And they did. And that job turned into running daily editorial and marketing content, managing a team of writers, editors, photographers, and freelancers, and really learning how to build editorial systems at scale. So it was sort of like my first taste of fast-moving brand storytelling, and I was totally hooked. From there, I was recruited into a digital agency as a community manager, and that was frontline marketing at its purest form, answering angry Facebook comments, being the voice of the brand, engaging with customers daily and seeing what actually resonated. And at the same time, I got exposed to brand strategy. So sitting in on tracking meetings, annual planning, and real kind of business discussions. So I wasn't just running social, I was seeing how a brand was operated kind of at the highest level, but also at the frontline level. And then I had a really interesting kind of pivot in my career. I was volunteering at Creative Mornings.
We love Creative Mornings.
Creative Mornings is the best. It is the best kept secret. And I don't think enough people know about it. It's such a wonderful community.
Which, as a side note, is a whole lot of usually breakfast, I think, meetings around Sydney. I don't know if she does them outside of Sydney, but Nicole Vellick and the team put together creatives from different industries or commercial and kind of marketing people to share their insights and ideas around a particular theme.
Yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful group. And so I met really interesting people there. And that's how I came across a branding agency called For the People. The founders were X, RGA, Interbrand, and Landor, some of the best, brand people in the business, building something new together. And they took a chance on me, and I got to have great hands-on experience with them. And really in that role at For the People, I learned to write and craft excellent brand strategy, work with absolutely killer creatives, and see how repositioning brands works from an agency side. That was 4 years of very intense sort of immersion in learning that craft. But I got to this point where I had this itch where I felt like I needed to do strategy, and I needed to be able to prove to myself that I could build a brand, not just write a really beautiful deck. And so I was given the opportunity. I was recruited to be the head of creative at Future Super, and tasked with repositioning the brand, building a creative team, and rolling brand across the full customer experience, which was kind of a dream come true. And so that gave me the kind of learning of shifting from strategy as a concept to brand as a real operational function. This is turning into a bit of a long-winded answer, but COVID happened, I relocated to the US, and I became a fractional consultant. And from there, I really, learned how to help founders and early stage businesses put brand systems in place in a very advisory capacity. So again, getting just a different gear under my belt for kind of building brands. And to your point, I've come absolutely full circle and boomeranged back to For the People, helping them out with strategy and supporting them with some US-based business.
Amazing. So digging into one of the things you mentioned then, which was around from an agency side, handing over a strategy deck and sort of hoping it works. What have you then learnt jumping ship to the other side and I guess either inheriting other people's strategy decks or developing your own. What is key in that jump off point into implementation?
Yeah, what is the key to jumping off and implementing? I think that strategy is one of the most kind of misunderstood or misapplied words in business. I think everybody talks about it and few actually do it in the sense of operationalizing. And if you ask a consultant, they'll tell you that strategy is like a guiding policy that directs action. And that sounds great. And it's not wrong, but it's hard to use. And so in practice, I start to think about a strategy, whether it's being handed off to me or whether I've developed it, as the logic for the company to make decisions that drive outcomes. So then I start to think about, okay, well, how do you test strategy? And most companies sort of say they have a strategy, but what they actually have is a wish list of things that they would love to have happen. And they'll say things like, we value innovation. Great. Who doesn't? We put customers first. Yes, great. Every other competitor will say that. But if strategy is actually guiding your decisions, it should give you those trade-offs of what are we prioritizing over another good thing. And one of the tools that I've used a lot in strategy is an even over statement, which is super simple, but things like being generous. It's great to say that you're generous as a business, but to say we prioritize generosity even over margin is a completely different statement. And I think it just takes a lot of guts to make those trade-offs. But once you do, it sort of empowers your entire team to start making those decisions at scale, which is when really interesting things start to happen.
One of the things we've done over years is sort of the antithesis of. So if we are all of these things, then what are we not? And sometimes that's how much anyone is willing to step into being something at the maybe detriment of something else, to your point, that might be good, it may not be, but it's sort of, I guess, defining what you're stepping into and how to be the most versus, stepping away from. What do you think makes a great strategy? When do you sit back and go, that's excellent?
I think a strategy is great when I see everyone using it and making decisions off the back of it. So not just a document that lives on a server, it's a decision-making system. And one of the metrics, indirect metrics that I had for myself at Future Super, because we were operating off of Google Drive, I could see the last time my brand strategy deck was open. And people had it open a lot. And every time I saw that, I was like, okay, good, this is useful. This is being used. And so I think when those things start to be talked about in conversation, like, well, we say that we value this. Are we really going to do it? Well, is that in line with our audience? Is that in line with our, expression principles, those sorts of things? I think it takes some of the heat out of the discussion as well, because it's not about a fiefdom or Amanda's opinion or marketing team's, obsession with tone of voice. It's actually about what we're trying to do together. And I really love that about strategy.
When thinking about the strategic process, when you're undergoing a repositioning of an organization from an agency side or internally, what do you think are some of the most underrated components to get right up front?
This might make me sound like a bit of a broken record, but I think a common reason strategy falls apart is that it's not built for the people that are actually making decisions. And it's treated like an executive kind of offsite deliverable. It's high production. It makes everyone feel good, but it doesn't change how we operate. And so I think baking strategy down into every level of decision making, from frontline employees knowing how to apply it, middle management knowing how to prioritize it, and leadership using it to filter what matters and what doesn't. I think that starts to become a really useful strategy. I think about strategy from the top down. So from organizational strategy like purpose, mission, vision, all the way down to brand strategy, expression principles, content strategy. And I think of it as a layering kind of diagram.
Do you think there's a world in which an organizational strategy can be implemented effectively without C-suite buy-in?
No, I don't think so. I say that because I've been in organizations where it's sort of hit a ceiling and it just doesn't go very far. It's just expression. It's tough to get budget. It's tough to get cross-functional collaboration because it's not really being set from the top down. And I think that's one of the toughest things as a marketer, as a CMO, to get that C-suite buy-in. There's a stat that I read while I was holding the CMO role at Future Super, which is that the CMO role is like the shortest tenured role in the C-suite.
Less than 2 years or something. Yep.
It's so short. And it's like you have to work with everybody in the business to be successful. You have exceedingly high expectations and you have growth that is expected, but there's so many inputs into that growth: product, market dynamics, all of these things. So it's a very long-winded way of saying I think you absolutely need the C-suite buy-in.
Do you think more CMOs should be represented at a board level? And if so, what is your pitch to commercial thinkers that think of a CMO role being the sort of, creative department?
I think bringing brand and marketing to the table at a board, at a C-suite level is critical for business. And I think a lot of CEOs get that. I think there is an unfortunate term that marketing gets painted with, which is the coloring in department. And if the perception is that you're the coloring in department, you're not at the big kids table. You're off doing fun, creative things, and you will not be taken seriously. I think the mission that I've been on is really trying to translate the business impact of creative and storytelling to reach people and move people to action, and to translate that to CEOs, to founders, but also to bring commercial awareness and business results into creative teams. Because I think there is a risk for creatives to be seen as artists in a business. And I think that's a risk to career growth. I think it undervalues the work that we do. And I think we should be standing up for the great work that we do because it has huge impacts on the bottom line of a business.
So if creatives within a business are not artists, what role do you think they do or should have?
If they're not artists, what are they? Great question. I mean, really, there is an element of craft in what we're doing. So there is whether you're talking about creative, copywriting, design, all of these sorts of things, it's communication and it's connecting with people. And that is, designed to reach an outcome. It's art in service of action, really. And that places a certain amount of expectation on the work. And I try to talk about this with marketing teams that I'm working in, is thinking in experiments. So we're not making things just to look pretty, and that is the difference. We're making things to make change, to make real things happen in the world. And we can measure that, which I think is one of the things that I find starts to interest people who have come from a more creative background, is like, we can actually see what the impact of this work is. And often it's not necessarily what our gut tells us. It's something different. So we almost become students of the audience. We're studying the audience to understand who they are and what works to move them.
Let's talk a little bit about your time sort of in-house and over on brand side. You mentioned before when you joined Future Super, you were tasked as sort of head of creative and part of a repositioning of the organization or the brand. What do you think are the pros and cons of engaging an agency as an external perspective on repositioning versus developing it in-house? And which do you think is more effective?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. The pros and cons, I mean, getting an external perspective from an agency is so valuable. And I see this when I go in agencies, and I've done, both in-house and agency. You are in an environment in an agency where everybody is thinking about the outside world. It's an intellectual kind of hotbed. It's very switched on to what is happening in the world, as it should be. I think one of the challenges of being in-house is you're navigating board meetings and, team meetings and team offsites, and you're doing a lot of like business operational things and don't necessarily have the headspace to be on the pulse. And for that reason, I think agencies are wonderful. They're also excellent at their craft. So the challenge of building your own team in an in-house situation is you're setting up what you want to be a creative kind of center of excellence. And I'm talking kind of about a creative team specifically, because that's sort of the context I was operating in. But I think agencies can help you specialize. They can help you get to where you want to go faster without having to drive, the long way around. The benefit of having an in-house team is that you can move really quickly. You can work cross-functionally really well. So I've had a few campaigns where we've partnered with people in culture, or we've partnered with the wider business to, engage the whole team. And those sorts of things would be really hard to lead from an agency perspective. But we had agencies helping us out from a PR standpoint, or we had, digital agencies. So I think it's really dependent on the business you're in. And it's also this cycle, as you would know, of like in-housing becomes trendy and then agencies become trendy. And it's this constant debate.
And every time it's like a new idea and then it loops back. And I think everyone
Yes.
lands on hybrid is best. You get good input for certain things and then speed internally.
Yes, exactly.
How important is doing good as a business to you? I know obviously from Future Super that you then headed over to the Sustainable Investment Exchange, or SIX as it's known. Both of these deeply rooted in doing good for the world. How important is that to you? And do you think there's a responsibility for all brands to do good?
Yeah, just a small question. How important is it for me? It has been very important to me from the beginning of my career. I started out my career thinking I would have liked to work for something like World Vision. I thought doing good is a part of kind of how I was raised. I want to be making a positive impact in the world. That's tricky in marketing. There's a lot of organizations and products that don't necessarily need to be out there. I think I've been very fortunate to have these opportunities come up. And I think anytime I hear the kind of conversation about, every business should be doing good, I do feel that brands have a social responsibility. That's not something everybody agrees with. But I also have had a lot of friends, mentees talk to me about this. And I think there is nothing wrong with people working for businesses that allow them to put food on the table and go home and be good moms and dads and, live their lives. So I think that's important to say, because I think that in marketing, we really glorify businesses that are doing amazing things. And it is hard to do. And there are not as many businesses doing great things as I would love for there to be. But I do think that brands have a responsibility to move the world forward and be on the pulse of what's good for people. And we can see the impact of what happens to a brand when the perception is that it is not doing good things for people. And this is a slightly different look at a brand through the lens of a spokesperson, but we can see Tesla's stock price tanking as a result of the market's perception of what Elon Musk is doing. So I think that would be my case study on brand perception and doing good. And you can look at it from a bleeding heart perspective, or you can look at it from a cold, hard market perspective. But either way, I really think both paint the case for brands doing good in the world.
Off the back of that, I was reading up about sort of trends and coming into 2025, 26, the rise of B2B kind of almost like internal influencers, people within business that have that are content creators in their own right or have a perspective. What are your thoughts on that landscape?
It's really interesting. There's a woman, I think the company is called Cognism, and it's a B2B tool. And a few years ago, she implemented this incredible like employee generated content strategy. I think they call it employee advocacy. And it was really interesting to watch. I think it's an underutilized strategy at the moment, especially looking at LinkedIn and if you're in B2B. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating. I think everyone should probably be taking a look at it.
Yeah. And if your internal people are willing to share and talk about and feel like it's newsworthy enough to, I think A, you're onto something from a brand perspective, but B, you've got these potential untapped assets, if you want to call it, like talking and working, that are going to be so different to an external perspective. I think in many ways even more powerful because they are internal and see the good, bad, and the ugly. And if they're still willing to contribute, then, what more could we be doing there?
Yes. We set up a little almost like a writing studio within Future Super where people could come in and sort of get their perspectives edited and shaped and they were doing really interesting work across a number of different programs that weren't marketing, but it elevated the brand awareness from that perspective and gave people skills and tools and something else in their toolbox to use. So I think it's a really neat thing to investigate.
Years ago, we worked with one of the big four consulting firms, and they had this partner of agribusiness who is this sort of, as you can imagine, like country guy from the land, had done really well over the years. And they built a whole sort of narrative around the work that they do and the problems they're solving. He sort of had the brains, but not necessarily the creative expertise to bring that to life in a compelling way to attract new customers or perhaps existing customers that didn't realize they operate in agribusiness. And I think that seed of the idea is sort of tapping into the smarts, but bringing a fresh perspective around the application or the
Mm-hmm.
storytelling wrapped around it is, I think we'll see more of it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. One of the things that I think a lot about with strategy is, strategy is using the resources you have to deliver a result that you want. And one of the things that you have is your employees. And I think that's actually such a missed opportunity. And I'd love to see more companies engaging their employees. There's something crazy like it's only like 16% of employees actually feel engaged in their work, which is both not surprising given the state of work and how we engage people, but also just what a missed opportunity to actually bring people in.
So tell me a bit about the job to be done when you joined Future Super. You mentioned a repositioning. What did you join and what did you end up leaving with?
So I joined Future Super when they were Series B, very grassroots kind of brand, strong vision from the founders, but with a mandate to grow. So they knew that they were positioning for growth and their story wasn't necessarily being told in the most impactful way. And so my role was to come in and reposition the brand, build the team that could execute on the brand strategy and drive brand-led growth. And what we did, I came in, I think in October, started doing, stakeholder interviews, focus groups, really understanding the audience, but also understanding the business and the mission and putting that together into a story that told, where they've come from, where they're going, and landing that in some pretty clear actions that they needed to take. And built the team into what I would call like a storytelling engine. So we had stories about the tangible impact of moving your money to invest it ethically. We took some pretty significant brand actions. We led a climate strike for businesses, which was tons of fun, but also just a really good example of what you can do when you have buy-in from the top down of putting your money where your mouth is, and started to roll the brand across the full brand experience from brand identity, website, launched an app, all of that, retention, emails, all of the things that you would expect with marketing. And when I left, we had acquired two other super funds and gone from $1 billion in funds under management to $10 billion in funds under management. So it was super fun. One of those kind of rocket ships that you get to ride and go along with for the journey. But it was also one where, you really felt like you were serving a community of people who cared about what you were doing something that was good for the planet, good for people, and doing it with really excellent team members.
Amazing. Big question for you. Interested to see how you respond. Do you think a mission or a purpose can be created or manufactured, or do you think it has to be inherent and founder or, C-suite led?
This is a really interesting one. I think it depends on what you mean by manufactured. I think slapping a feel-good mission onto a company for the sake of marketing, that's always going to collapse under the weight of its own sort of BS. I think if you're talking about intentionally articulating and crafting a foundational truth about a company, I think it can be shaped, but it has to be rooted in something real. And I think I've had the opportunity to work with mostly founder-led businesses, and that has meant that the mission has been very clear, and that's turned into a competitive advantage. It makes alignment easier, it focuses your priorities, and it kind of acts as a guardrail against short-termism. And when that's absent, I think it's really easy to drift. There's not a filter, there's nothing to kind of ground things in. So I think you can ground it in, a founding myth, a founding principle, your audience or someone that you serve. But I think it does need to be anchored in something real. Otherwise you get things like WeWork's purpose statement or mission was like elevating the world's consciousness back when they went public. It's like, what is that? You can't do anything with that.
Another big question for you. I'm just interested in how you respond. What is a brand without a strategy?
That is such a good question. I mean, it's still a brand, right? So there's always a brand, whether or not you've tried to shape it. I think without a strategy, you probably have a lot of chaos. If strategy requires trade-offs and decision making, I think without that, you have things like squabbles over, well, who are we talking to? Who are we? Marketing thinks one thing, product thinks another, customer service team thinks something else. It becomes a really convoluted decision-making process internally. You have fiefdoms. It's generally kind of unhinged. And I think that the external impact of all of that is that you have a disjointed experience because your teams aren't talking to each other and there's no kind of cohesive red thread that runs through all of it.
Shifting over to Starbucks, obviously you're in Seattle, home of Starbucks. Huge brand shift in recent times, new leadership and new approach. I've been reading a little bit about it here in Australia, although we only sort of have, I think, less than 50 stores across Australia. Give me a bit of your perspective and maybe sort of the background on what you've seen shift for Starbucks. And do you think it's an effective strategy?
Yeah, I have been very fascinated by this, both as a Pacific Northwest local and as a brand strategist. I used to go to the Starbucks in Sydney when I lived there when I felt homesick, which is weird and, very capitalistic. But I think what's happening right now is one of the most interesting brand repositions that we're seeing like on a public stage. And Brian Niccol, the new CEO, has come from Chipotle, and what he's doing isn't just a marketing shift from what I can tell. It's rebuilding the brand from the inside out. So if you sit on the Reddit forums of the Starbucks employees, which is something that I've done because I'm a massive brand nerd, I always say to my strategists, the truth is in the comments. Like the YouTube comments, the Reddit comments, it's always there.
Or reviews, right? Looking at, sentiment.
Always. So if you read that, you could see, for years it's been a massive problem. They've gone through a ton of labor disputes, unionization efforts. It's not been a good time. And Starbucks can't position themselves as this community coffee house while they're battling labor disputes and public backlash. And so his first moves have been to fix the foundation before he looked at the facade. And I don't know what he did, but they, eased the union tensions and shored up labor relations, which I think is a massive win before they started to go out with advertising. The Super Bowl ad that they ran wasn't, in my view, just for customers. It was for employees. And I think it reinforced Starbucks as a coffee company, which is different because it's kind of drifted into like any drink that you could ever want, a huge expanded menu.
Yeah, I didn't realize the stats were that they actually make, if not more, like a significant amount of money from cold drinks than what you think of as a hot coffee.
Yeah. I didn't realize this either. And until I walked into a store and these college students were behind me and they're all ordering things that are not coffee drinks. And I saw this and I was like, wow, this is very different to when I was, 18 and buying a coffee.
Even just the idea that you would say, where's the local coffee shop, or do you want to meet at a coffee shop? And then actually everybody's getting a matcha iced latte or whatever.
Exactly. So yeah, what we're seeing there, I think, is this tremendous move towards brand-led growth. They hired their first chief brand officer. They brought on Anomaly, a very, heralded creative agency. And they're kind of following in the footsteps of, something like Airbnb has done, which is shift the budget from discounting to brand-led growth. So I'm really interested to see how this pans out.
I don't know if it was the Super Bowl ad, but one of the new videos I just watched, or ads, I think it's a 60-seconder from Starbucks, is following the role of the barista. And it's sort of really, in fact, that is the one takeaway, is sort of how important and it's a career job. It's not just a kind of pick up a few shifts, like being almost the pride in being a Starbucks barista and everything that holds, which is such a shift from the work that I've seen previously. And to your point, perhaps not just for customers, but for internal morale and the pride of working within the brand, maybe starting on foundations and internally before looking at external customer perspectives.
Totally. And for audiences that aren't in America, I think it's probably worth saying in America, our health insurance is tied to employment. And Starbucks was actually one of the first companies to offer health benefits, education benefits to, I think it was workers who were working maybe 20 hours a week or more, but really meaningful benefits, and that was something that set them apart initially. So it kind of is a return to the heartland and a real shift from where they've been with the labor disputes recently. But yeah, exactly, they're looking inside to figure out how to position externally.
One of the things that you do, I think, for fun is write a newsletter, a brand-led growth newsletter for bold brands. What are some ideas, topics, or brands that you've been noodling on? What is interesting you at the moment?
Yeah, yes, I do write a brand newsletter for fun, very nerdy. Every week I think about what I want to write about, and it's just what catches my fancy. Recently, I've written about ski resorts. I'm a skier. I think what's happening in the skiing industry is very interesting. There's a lot of consolidation. Prices are very high. So I sort of unpicked some of the brands in the skiing industry. One of the things that I have been interested in, and I haven't written about this yet, this is a purely indulgent, this would be an indulgent newsletter, but I've been interested in brands that are moving from kind of online to in real life executions. Brands that are doing things that are sort of purely for like the delight of making things. It feels like a real comeback from this almost obsession with digital where we're just churning out digital detritus all the time. I think Gap's another one that's done that with their dancing ads and things that you go, wow, you couldn't do that on a computer screen. That's just people. And I feel like we're craving that with the way that the world is and AI. And so
Yeah. I think you've also got like micro content, say TikTok videos of dancing, people dancing, becoming a little bit more of a seed of a sort of cultural connection between people and brands and going, interesting, maybe a dancing video for Gap. I think one of our team posted it on Slack this week saying, sorry, is Gap cool again? Like,
yeah.
into the fore and into like cultural relevance through
Yeah.
maybe seeds of ideas that have been seen in other ways. It's a really interesting shift from pure digital and everyone going e-commerce and sort of focused online. And I think a swing back to put your phone down, screen down and just craving people and culture and connection. What do you think we'll see more of?
More of that, definitely. I think more editorial and Substack. There was another interesting piece I read this week. This is not an original take, and I feel like that's important to say, but I agree with it. Brands are snapping up Substack handles, and I think that's a really interesting move for a brand because if you have a great writer, and great writers there's an abundance of great writers, and that would be such a great way to own your audience and connect with your audience. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Substack writer, but I think people are craving some more of that like quality, long form, interesting content that is not just an Instagram ad.
Yeah, considered and maybe more personal or authentic. There's a great Substack writer here, Zara Wong. She was over at Mecca and Mecca Cosmetics and a few other sort of fashion brands before that. And she started writing Substack a long time ago and now is a paid to subscribe and she consults for other brands and sort of born a business from her writing. I harp on all the time around great copy, great succinct and considered copywriting is one of the most underrated and underappreciated, much harder than writing just dribbling on, but a really succinct and kind of coherent point of view. I think everyone could be doing more and better of that kind of considered work. It just takes time and therefore budget.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
What do you think your early days of copywriting have helped shape in your career? What do you think it's sharpened for you?
Oof. Man, everything. I've thought about this a little bit. My mom is really big on writing and she really kind of taught me to write, helped me edit papers in school. And it is such a useful skill, even just thinking about writing in Slack and how much of work these days is often async and written. I think being able to convey ideas succinctly is a huge part of what you do as a strategist, and being able to move people. I am a strategist who can write. I'm not a copywriter. I could do it in a pinch, but I think there is great value in being able to sit down and dash out a headline or dash out a narrative and go, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and use it as a starting point. I don't like to brief things that I couldn't kind of articulate as a starting point.
Well, it's a great interim jump off point. You write this amazing strategy deck and it's sort of I guess, giving a bit more flavor to people that perhaps can't, it's out of their subject matter expertise, or they sort of need a little more flavor to bring a line to life. I think it's a great skill set that you can take it further into both the briefing, but also, just to give a bit more perspective on the sense that you're trying to make of something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who do you admire from a brand perspective? Who do you think's got it down pat?
This is like asking someone to choose a favorite child, and it changes based on my mood. And I'll tell you why. It's because I really want brands to be effective. I want them to be moving. I want them to be full of conviction. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean that I'm the consumer. I just admire them for all of that, because I know how hard that is. I have been really fascinated by this brand called Bobbi here in the US, Bobbi Formula. They're only about, I think, 8 years old. And what I love about them is they're taking a need, which is, formula feeding, but they've tapped into the emotional need of like combo feeding. There's a lot of shame for women around not being able to breastfeed 100%, but not every woman can breastfeed all of the time. So they've taken that and they've really built this community of brand advocates who absolutely love Bobbi because of how they speak to women, the sorts of things that they do. And they've made some really kind of big business decisions to prioritize their customers. When COVID happened, there was like a run on formula. And instead of just making a ton of money and selling as much formula as they could, they prioritized the customers. And they said, if you're already a subscriber, we're going to set aside a year's worth of formula for you, which like just gives me goosebumps, because to be able to provide for your child and have the trust in a company during a time like the pandemic, I just think is like such a massive move. And they've continued to just knock it out of the park with normal brand marketing. But I think the conviction, the storytelling, the CEO is also amazing and really the face of the brand.
Lastly, what tools, ideas, or things have shaped you throughout your career? What do you hang your hat on?
Mm-hmm. So the first one that comes to mind is actually community. I have made a big effort over the years to be in conversation with people who are doing interesting things, whether that's on Twitter, Substack,
on Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. So people in my field, people outside my field, people who actually challenge me and will push back on me. I think it's really easy to silo yourself in an industry bubble or even a company bubble. I think the second tool that is going to sound silly perhaps is Pixar's like storytelling framework. Once upon a time, every day until one day, because of that, fill in the blank, because of that, fill in the blank, until finally fill in the blank. And I'll use that to test a strategy and to write a story for a business. And it's like, it sounds silly, but it tests out my logic.
Wow.
And then the last tool that I find myself coming back to again and again is another one of those like big picture thinking tools, which is like if brand is a kind of world building or impact exercise. I've got this template that I've used at my last few jobs, and it's just a set of concentric circles, like a good strategist. But it asks, what will we do as a company at the core? How do we embed this strategy into our operations? And then going one out, for our customers, how are we going to make their lives better? One out from that, for our community, how do we contribute beyond selling? And then in culture, how do we shape the conversation, or what do we aspire to shape in conversation? And again, that kind of forces you to get honest really quickly about like, well, is this just like a nice thing to say, or do we actually believe this, and can we commit to it?
Amazing. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like you're one of the rare sort of combo of hungry, humble, smart. You're just a great person to chat through all things strategy and life with. You're very considered, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. This was so much fun.
Aside from the fact that I had a bit of a girl crush on Amanda during the interview, as you can probably tell, what I loved and what I took from the conversation was this idea of trade-offs for a brand, like you can be this at the cost of this. I certainly don't see that much conviction in many organizations. It's sort of, we'll play into this as long as it suits us, but not if it doesn't. And I think the idea that we will be X even at the cost of Y is a really strong and compelling perspective to have on brand strategy.